Welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the really wide-ranging psychological impacts of Will Smith's slap. I'm going to talk about anger and what was really behind the anger, how it's a cover emotion for both fear and sadness. I'm going to walk you through how his anger is really harboring and hiding deep, deep sadness. I'm going to talk about the worst day cycle, how his childhood set him up, that he wasn't even slapping Chris Rock, he's actually slapping his father. I'm going to talk about how science, how we're all in this, we're following science, yet the science shows we make up our feeling reactions to words, but why aren't we teaching the science behind that? I'm going to tell you more about that. I'm also going to talk about how this creates a completely confusing dynamic for gender roles, because if we're supporting women, isn't what he did misogynistic? Isn't she capable of taking care of himself? Like, there are so many, and there's more things I'm going to cover, but these are deep questions, and I'm going to get to all of them. So let's start with the anger, first of all, because I think that's what most people are grabbing hold of and can relate to. Well, anger is a cover emotion. It means it's hiding something deeper. It's a protection mechanism because we're not ready to expose what's really happening inside of us. All right? Well, the first thing that anger is covering is fear. Whenever we're angry, we are scared to death. Now, fear is always one of three things. Now, watch how profound this is. Fear is either the fear of rejection, the fear of inadequacy. In other words, we don't think we have the skills, tools, or knowledge to do something, or the fear of powerlessness. Well, let's look at Will Smith's life. He talks about as a child watching his father beat his mother, blood coming out, and that he didn't do anything. He learned, this is where the worst day cycle got born in him. For those of you who are not familiar, who have not read my book, I lay this all out. Every single one of us is caught in the worst day cycle. Doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are, nothing. The most successful, the least successful. All any of us are doing is reliving our childhood trauma. And I'm going to teach you how and show you how even the so-called super successful Oscar winner billionaire is stuck reliving his trauma against himself, and he doesn't even know it. Because he watched his father beat his mother, and he's felt this tremendous inadequacy, which he wrote about in his memoir recently, that his whole life, all he's ever done is try to apologize to women. So then what does that do? He felt a sense of inadequacy and complete powerlessness. He learned, remember childhood trauma, the 4 stages of the cycle: trauma, fear, shame, and denial. He experienced trauma, watching his father hit his mother, goes into fear, completely inadequate and powerless, and because of that, he's going to be rejected by both mother and father because he's not capable. So then what's he do? What happens then? It creates tremendous shame, the sense of no worth. He's felt his whole life he has no worth. That's what he talked about in his book. That everything's a facade, everything's a fake to hide how inadequate he feels, right? But then there's denial, and here's the denial piece. He relives the trauma against himself by picking a wife who flat out says, publicly, she never wanted to get married. She spent the day of their wedding walking down the aisle, bawling her eyes out because she never wanted to marry him. Never. Rejection, inadequacy, powerlessness. Devastating cocktail of emotions stuck in the worst day cycle. This is all of us. Tremendous shame. And so the joke comes in, he laughs, he sees her face. What does it trigger right then? Right then. His childhood. He gets up out of his chair because he says in his memoir, he's been his whole life, he's been belittling himself and apologizing to his mother that he stood there and didn't take action. So he charges out of his chair. He didn't slap Chris Rock. He slapped the father he didn't slap as a child. That's how the worst day cycle works. He's reliving his childhood trauma against himself. But do you see how this is the shame and denial portion? It boomerangs back. It's not appropriate to beat somebody. He's an adult now. He's no longer a child, but he's stuck in the childlike state. This is what happens to all of us. He's married a woman who rejects him nonstop, has affairs, they have an open marriage. The only way he can keep the relationship together is he has to give himself up. He has to give himself away and put up with complete rejection. So he relives that sense of inadequacy and powerlessness in his marriage. He is stuck as that infant, 8, 9 years old, watching his father beat his mother. He picked a wife. That's why you pick the narcissist. That's like, people don't get it. We pick these people because we learned to pick them in childhood. Our trauma set us up for it. It doesn't matter who you are. That's why I say the other person is never the problem. It doesn't condone their behavior. I'm not letting narcissists off the hook. I'm not saying that person who abused you isn't about, that they shouldn't be held accountable for that. But we have to hold ourselves accountable that as a society, now the science, we know scientifically that every single one of us makes up our emotions. They are learned behaviors from the trauma we go through in childhood. They're made up of 3 things: our physiology, our life experiences, and the culture we're born into. We are born in a culture where we celebrate and reward the victim beyond what they need to be. It's okay to protect victims, but we celebrate them. That's a cultural value. Okay? The next thing is, because none of us have been taught emotional mastery, because for centuries, science, especially science, has belittled, denigrated, and basically castigated emotions, and society as well. Oh, intellect. But science knows we don't even have a thought. Every single thought is generated by a feeling, yet they don't teach you that. They keep denigrating emotions. Lisa Feldman Barrett has laid out the complete process of how our brain and body constructs. We construct emotions, and this is a perfect example. Will Smith, right there, hears the joke, sees his wife, goes back to childhood, brings up the trauma from the past, and in that moment goes fear, rejection, inadequacy, powerless. I'm going to react to that. I'm protecting my family. No, you're not. No, you're not. You've created a societal construct of victimhood. You chose to put yourself in a victim place because you experienced it as a child. And then you put that on the world with your actions. This is what we all do, and this is why it's critical that we get into truth and reality. If we're going to follow the science, we need to start telling people the truth. Nobody ever makes us think, feel, believe, or do anything. I don't have time to get into the full breakdown of how emotions are made, but if you go watch my previous video on the Tinder swindler, I did 2 of them. Just go to my YouTube and look up Tinder swindler and you'll see the 2 videos, and I lay out how Lisa Feldman Barrett, she is in the top 1% of all scientists in the world cited for her work on emotions. But she's, for anyone who's being researched and then cited for their work, she is in the top 1% of all scientists in the world. And she lays out exactly how all of us construct our own emotions from the pain from our past. We do it to ourselves. Will Smith needs to be taught that. Jada Pinkett Smith needs to be taught that. The council culture, big tech, these people that suppress all of this language need to be taught that. Because here, look at what's happening if we don't. Do you see, if we don't get into truth and reality, that all of us are creating these feelings inside of ourselves and then hiding behind, I'm protecting my family. Do you see what that slap has now created, the precedent it's created? Now, if I don't like what you say, I have just created permission to act out violence on you. It's done on a global scale. We have just made that okay because I'm protecting the family. Do you see the devastating consequences of this victim mentality where we're pushing the false and against science narrative that words make us think, feel, or do something, instead of the truth that because of our unhealed childhood trauma, because of the worst day cycle, we bring our pain from the past and the societal incorrect messages about emotions, we place those inside ourselves and act them out on others, then play the victim and blame them. That's the societal construct we've all created and that we aren't challenging. That by doing that, it's getting worse and worse. Now we're getting more and more physical at just a mere joke. A mere joke by somebody who wasn't aware of somebody's medical condition. He wasn't aware. See, somebody with emotional mastery, if we didn't belittle emotions, Will Smith would have gone, wow, why did he say that? I better gather information before I choose an emotion that makes me, oh wow, I was about to go slap him. Just like, oh my God, I almost relived my childhood with my father. I almost went and became my father. See, because we don't teach emotional mastery, he couldn't use that process to save himself and save the world of all of that turmoil and trauma. Like that was a traumatic event watching that. Incredibly traumatic. That's the cost of these lies, of not following the true science, of not teaching emotional mastery, of not teaching people about the worst day cycle and how every single one of us has been raised by perfectly imperfect parents who leave wounds in us. And Will Smith, as much as he's trying, is perfectly imperfect also. And that's the other thing here. Will Smith is not a bad person. He's just like all of us. He's perfectly imperfect. It's what I always say. People think the most successful, they're the ones who figured it out. Now, this is another piece of this whole dynamic. Can you see it clear as day? How erratic he was emotionally. 40 minutes later, an incoherent victory speech, crying, the shame pouring out of him for his actions. Can't put words to it. 2 hours later at a party dancing, like he's all over the place. He's perfectly imperfect. He doesn't need to be judged or belittled, but we need to get into reality. That's all of us. Like everyone's going, oh, how dysfunctional. Just throwing him under the bus. Well, he's you and me. That's all of us. Now, we may not act it out with physically hitting somebody, but we're all just as crazy. We're all just as perfectly imperfect and dysfunctional. The difference is he lives his life on camera where 20 billion people can see that dysfunction. You don't. But you sit there and you judge him. We all act like Will Smith in our own unique way. None of us are immune from that. That's the worst day cycle. That's called being human. That's called being perfectly imperfect. We should not sit in judgment of Will Smith. We should sit in reality of, oh my God, that is a window into us, into our world. And what happens when we don't teach emotional mastery, when we don't teach the truth, that we create our own feelings, that we're all caught in the worst day cycle, that we're all projecting our pain from the past, from our own childhood and our perfectly imperfect parents, we're projecting that out onto others and abusing others with it. And then we are all promoting and playing the victim. Will Smith went what's called falsely empowered. He hears the joke. He sees her face, his wife's face, immediately relives the trauma, fear, shame, and goes into denial from his childhood. I don't want to feel that pain again of how helpless I was. And then he goes falsely empowered because he feels so disempowered as a child. That's his whole childhood story, is disempowerment. And so this is what happens in those moments. We create an adapted false persona, what's called the adapted wounded child. I have videos on that too if you want to learn about it. That becomes falsely empowered. And so he gets up there, I'm going to whack this guy and I'm protecting my family. I'm going to scream obscenities. I'm big bad boss. And then people call that toxic masculinity and whatever you want to call it. What that is sadness underneath it. Remember, fear, rejection, inadequacy, powerlessness, which ultimately hides deep, deep sadness. That's what he's feeling. That's what comes pouring out of him in his victory speech, but he's still falsely empowered. He won't take ownership. He's claiming, I'm the family man. He has to hide behind the bravado, but he underneath, he knows. He admitted it in his book, how disempowered he is. He's trying his butt off to get there. He deserves credit for that. And what we saw was the battle to reclaim the soul. What's heartbreaking is nobody's told him, look, you're giving your soul away. You've never gotten upset enough at your father or your mother. Your mother didn't protect you either, Will. And you've given your life up to women that take from you, just like your life was taken from you as a child. And you keep replaying it. You keep reliving the trauma against yourself, putting yourself underneath a woman, reliving the rejection, inadequacy, and powerlessness. Jade is not responsible for that. Yes, her own childhood has made it, she's falsely empowered and controlling him. She doesn't know how to get close because of her own childhood. That's why she didn't want a marriage and doesn't like, and has to have polyamory and all of that stuff. She's scared to death of intimacy. She can't have it because of her own traumatic childhood. And so she goes falsely empowered too. But she's not responsible for how Will has chosen to play the victim in their relationship. That's on Will. That's on all of us. Now, we're not to blame that we do that because our society refuses to teach us the truth, that we've all been wounded and injured in childhood, that we've all suffered trauma, horrific trauma. Not a little bit. I mean horrific. All of us. We are all just as broken as Will Smith. None of us are immune from that. We need to get into reality. Society needs to own that. And then society needs to own the science, that we have to stop controlling from the victim position, because that's what he did. He played the victim and then went over top and took the power with the slap and then the yelling and screaming and the lack of apology. He played the victim. Now look in your own life. How do you do that? Look, if you read my book, here's the other thing to recognize is I sound very falsely empowered, putting down everyone and everything. Well, do you realize what I'm saying? I'm talking about me and my own false empowerment, my own disempowerment, how I manipulated from the bottom. The only reason I can talk about this and teach it is because I'm it. That's why I know it. But I got into reality that I am this dysfunctional, that we all are. That's why I can talk about it, because it's me. What I saw in Will Smith was me. I was him. I did stuff like that. We all do. And so Will is stuck, reliving the trauma from his past. Now it's getting worse. He's spewing it on the world, on a world stage. Not because he's a bad person, but because our society won't give him the knowledge, skills, and tools that he's hungry for. He's trying to find it. He's working his tail off. But we won't give him the real science because we don't want to let go of our victimhood. Because why? What does our victimhood give us? Do you see it? What do I get when I'm the victim? Power. I can control you from down here because you have to change because I'm the victim. You have to be nice to me. It works, doesn't it? You're the problem. And see, when I'm the victim, I never have to take responsibility. I get stuck. Do you see? Who else doesn't take responsibility in life? Who never takes responsibility? The child, right? They can't. They're a child. That's the parent's job. So why do you think we all want to be the victim? Because it puts us back in a childlike state, and you know what's underneath all of that? The sadness. What we're hoping for by playing the victim is that mom and dad will end up being perfect, that they won't make a mistake, that they will come back and give us the love we never got. That's why we play the victim. We're just praying, hoping mom and dad will give us the love we didn't get, or someone else will come in and play that role. It works. It's a great way to avoid the deep sadness, the truth that our parents are human. And by the nature of being human, they will hurt us. And by the nature of all of us being human, we will hurt others, as will hurt Chris Rock. We are all hurtful people. We have to get into truth about that and talk openly about it if we want to put an end to this. The next piece of this is, what about the misogynistic message here? Like, I'm kind of shocked. With the changing culture, and women are equal, and it's now, like, I've been on dates and pulled out a woman's chair, opened their car door, and I've been, castigated, assaulted. What are you doing? You don't think I can take care of myself? You think I'm just some weak woman? Like, they felt offended that I was denigrating them. I don't know. I mean, they get to have their reality. I know not every woman feels that way, but do you see what we're creating? We don't know where the lines are. And so now Will Smith goes and protects her, but wait a minute. Do you see the underlying message? That means she can't protect herself. Well, that's very what he did is very by these new rules of society, what he did was incredibly misogynistic. Like, we have to call it that. Like, if we're going to change the rules to all of these things about, women, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, like, don't hear me as trying to say we should go back to the old way. I'm just, all I'm trying to bring is truth to the discussion. If women are equal and can take care of themselves, and when men step up and do these things, they're misogynistic, well, why isn't anyone calling them out for that? But that's the one piece he's getting praised for. Oh, wait a minute, so now that means there's a double standard. Women will get to decide when it's okay for a man to take the old misogynistic role and when he can't. Well, how does a man navigate that? How does he know that pulling out the chair is okay for you, but not the other one? Like, I don't have an opinion on it. I'm just saying, like, do you see, like, there's so many things at play here. These are the societal rules that create the emotions that we then use as reactions to justify our victimhood and attack somebody. That's why I'm bringing it up. Because whatever side you're on, you're creating a society that's setting up these rules that we then use to abuse people with. So do you realize that those cheering of how he protected her are advocating conditional misogyny? And they're advocating that women get placed in a misanthropic position where they get to decide when to manipulate men and get control and get him to stand up and beat somebody up. Here's another question. If it's okay to protect the family, right? That's what he did. He protected the family. What if the comedian was a woman? What if, I think it was, is it Schumer, Lisa Schumer? I can't remember. Amy Schumer was one of the guest hosts. What if she said that joke? If you're condoning him standing up for his family and his wife, why couldn't he do that to a woman? Why is it okay to beat a man but not a woman? Well, wait, what about the trans people? Can't do, like, do you see all these, do you see the mess we're creating? You can't, if you have it this way, you have to have it this way. You can't cut them out. Now do you see the validity of we have to get into reality that this isn't about words. This is about trauma. This is about childhood. We're arguing and legislating the wrong things. We're lying that we follow science. We're not in reality. That's what all of this exposes. The duplicitous nature of all of us, the perfectly imperfect nature of all of us, and the biggest fact of all, the massively overwhelming denial we are all in, because we don't want to talk about these truths. We don't want to deal with these truths. We're going to land up on a side that puts me in power, the victim side. We're going to choose our little spot that makes me the victim. Well, I'm here to cut the legs out of underneath all of that. That's why there's only one solution. You have to rip that away. Protect the victim. Don't reward the victim. And that's what we're doing with these trying to legislate words. Legislating words creates victim classes. That'll never work. It always ends in this: abuse. Because you can't legislate it. Because do you see how do we legislate? Will Smith can hit a man but can't hit a woman. Could he hit a trans person? Like, do you see? If you're going to make it about words and you can't use words, now you have to have all these different rules. Well, which rules apply? And why is it fair over here but not over here? Now, if we're all equal, why couldn't he then hit a woman? Why is that? Like, you can't have it both ways. Underneath all of this is overwhelming sadness. Remember, I started with cover emotions. Anger covers fear. Fear, rejection, inadequacy, powerlessness. The fear covers sadness. And that's what, when you see him, I started to cry when I watched him do that acceptance speech, because the tears pouring out of his eyes was his sadness. But his words were falsely empowered. He could not let himself live in his sadness. He has a history of showing up at interviews for Jada and confronting the interviewer, "Don't mess with my wife." He's given himself away and put himself underneath women who've abandoned him and neglected him. Not because they're bad people, but because they're hurt too, and they're sad too. And they're perfectly imperfect also. Why won't we talk about that? That's the issue. We are all hurt and sad. We are all broken. We are all dysfunctional. We are all Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith in our own unique way. We are all stuck in the worst day cycle, repeating the trauma from the past, creating emotions and using those against ourselves. It is up to us to make the choice to grow out of that. We are not to blame, because all we did was what we knew. But now with new information, we have a choice. Anyone who has listened to this video to this point, from anything from here previous in your life, you're not to blame for. You were just doing the best you could with the information you had at the time. But now that you know about the worst day cycle, now that you know that we create our own emotions, and you have the opportunity to go read Lisa Feldman's book, watch my videos to learn about that, learn about the adopted wounded child and all these things. For the first time in your life, you have choice. You have an option. You can get out of this victim culture. You can change all of this. You never had that option before. And so from this day forward, if you choose not to go watch those things, if you choose not to become an expert, if you choose not to learn and grow, you're not to blame, but you are responsible for the life you create from this point forward. And the part you play in advancing a society that continues to reward and teach all of us to play the manipulative, covert, disempowered, controlling victim from the bottom who then beats up other people from the bottom position. You can live your life that way and you can continue to promote it, but take responsibility for it. You can't walk away. You can't deny it now. You've come this far. That's on you. Now you get to choose that, but just when someone asks you, go, no, I get a lot from it. Because we do. Look at what happens when we play the victim. The government pays for it. Everyone comes to our rescue. We don't have to be responsible. We get to stay the child, and we get to hope that somebody's going to be the mother and father I never got. And I get to blame you for it. I never have to look at the part I played. So I leave the choice to you. But there's much more going on in this slap. It's much bigger. And my hope is you choose to become an expert. Go learn how to heal your fear. If you don't know how to do that, my book will show you how. This isn't about a sales pitch. You'll find that out on your own. It's about giving people a choice and letting them know there's another way. We don't have to suffer like this. We don't have to beat each other up because we're reliving, because Will Smith put his father's face on Chris Rock and then in front of 100 billion people hit his father. And projected his wife's face onto Chris Rock and hit her too. That's who he's hitting. He's hitting the women in his life who've abandoned him, and he doesn't know it. And that's just heartbreaking. We need to know that that's what's happening in these moments so we can all heal. Because nobody should. Think of that poor man in front of 100 billion people to show his imperfection like that. That's just got to be excruciating. And then to sit and lay in bed at night and wondering how many people like myself are talking about him. And, I hope I don't come across as making fun of him. I'm trying to advocate for him and recognize he only did it because no one's taught him. And I think, he's put the work in. He's trying to learn. He's trying to get out of it. We just need all of us. We're responsible. We're the society. Each one of us listening and watching this, we're the society. We're responsible. We are partly responsible for Will Smith. Because each of us gets the individual choice to do the work and stop advocating the victim culture and all of that. We create this. That's the part we play because we're the culture. And so if we choose not to learn how emotions are really made, if we choose not to learn and grow past our fear in the worst day cycle, we are creating the culture that allows Will Smith to play the victim and all of us to be hurt by that. So that's not the culture I want to be a part of. That's why I started the Greatness University. The Greatness Movement is to change all that. If that's what you're looking for, if you want to be a part of that, then look into my stuff. And maybe you want to buy something and so you can learn more. But man, I give most of it away free. Almost all of it. Just watch my videos and learn about it. And then take it to somebody else. Change the culture yourself. Play a part in changing the culture. So there's my Will Smith rant. If you like this type of content, I guess like it, share it. But remember, we're all perfectly imperfect. We are all Will Smith. There's no difference. We're all in that together. We're all caught in our worst day cycle. We're all on the journey trying to figure this out. I just ask that we take ownership of it, that we get out of denial and we accept that that's truth and it's our job to do the work. We owe that to ourselves, to our children, and if we want to participate in society, I'm not saying you have to, we owe it to society. So if you want to play a part in that, my stuff will show you how to do it. So there you go. Enjoy the journey.